European banks are facing serious challenges, rating agency downgrades and increased capital requirements. Our next guest is trying to follow the latest approaches to the European debt crisis and a directly associated banking crisis. He thinks it's enough to induce vertigo. Joining me now is a man who is best known by his web persona, the streetwise professor. University of Houston's Craig Pirrong is with us this morning in Houston. Good morning, Craig.
Good morning.
Now, Craig, yesterday we heard from Blue Crest founder that the sovereign debt crisis is really all about economics, but you think it's about politics?
Yes, it's about the sort of the interaction between economics and politics. They have an economic problem, but they have to find a political structure to solve that economic problem, and that's very difficult for them to do. They haven't been able to do it so far, and despite lots of efforts and lots of meetings, they don't seem to be any close to coming up with that political solution.
And now, how would you compare the ECB to TARP?
Well, there's an important difference between lending to private banks and lending to governments, to sovereigns. This is something that's been known in the economics literature for a very long time. And so if you think of a lender of last resort, which some people want the ECB to be, the old formula is that the lender of last resort should lend against good collateral at a penalty rate. Well, it's kind of hard to do that with sovereigns. What are you going to take as collateral? Lend to Italy, you get the Uffizi Gallery as a collateral. That's sort of a challenge. It's essentially a political issue to make sure that the borrower has the political will and the economic resources to repay, and that's different than, say, a TARP-type program. And so that's why the ECB has been very reluctant to step into a role as lender of last resort until they see the creation of a political solution that makes any promises by governments to repay credible.
But do you think the ECB has any leverage here, or do they really just have to be the lender of last resort?
Well, yeah, it's in some respects a game of chicken. I think that they do have a lot of leverage. They have been, by being standoffish and aloof, for example, in the aftermath of last week's summit, that they are putting pressure on governments to try to come up with a solution. But at the same time, if things do spiral out of control, they'll be under a lot of pressure to capitulate as well. So, that's why it's like a game of chicken in many ways.
We also heard yesterday from Blue Crest Michael Platt that arithmetically, Italian debt is simply going to blow up. What is your take?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that certainly, because if everybody thought it was going to blow up, it would have blown up. But I think that is a very realistic scenario, and they're certainly teetering on the edge. If you look at the fundamentals, they're already about 120% debt to GDP ratio. Their growth is abysmal, and so essentially the fundamentals are very weak, and that's why we are where we are.
Well, thanks for your thoughts this morning, Craig. I hope you'll join us again soon. That's Craig Pirrong, known as the Streetwide Professor.